Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. I am joined today by our football analyst, Vince D'Addario. Vince, we're 2 days away, so we're recording this podcast on Thursday. It's going to come out on Friday, but we're 2 days away. When it comes out, we'll be a day away from Notre Dame starting their spring practice. And as we predicted, we will have zero access during the spring. We will have a 3-minute video, which will probably have about 5 or 6 plays each, that we'll be able to scour through. But we'll do our best to get as much behind-the-scenes intel as we can, which we did, obviously, in the Offensive Line podcast recently. But before we dive really into a full look at the spring, which we will have out Saturday morning, Vince, let's take a look at the final skill position, or overall, the position I'm trying to say this nicely, non-special teams positions, right? I was going to say real positions, but I didn't mean it like that.
Right.
But let's talk about the last one, and it's safety. And we chose to use safety last because I think a case could be made that this is the biggest question mark on the football team heading into the spring, Vince, where it's also ironic that we say that because it's also arguably the best player on the team plays the exact position.
But he's exactly what I was going to say.
He's just one dude, right? He's just
and
one
you need
dude.
At least two to start. And if you follow what Marcus Freeman does with his defenses in the recent history, he's had 3 out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's run with 5 defensive backs, and that 5th defensive back has been a safety. So ideally, you would think that is something that he's looking at doing in the future.
Eventually.
That is correct. And I would be shocked if that was the case this year.
But that all depends on how how things go in the spring, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's just dive right in, Vince. And the one positive that you have, and this is true of not just the safety position, but the defense as a whole, to be a great defense that can truly play on the big stage and beat the best teams, is you need legitimate difference makers, elite players. And I would argue that Notre Dame has the best safety coming back next year, the best safety in the entire country coming back next year. That's Kyle Hamilton. And I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do in the Marcus Freeman defense, Vince. But what does it do for a defense, and what does it do for a position group that is a big question mark to have such a talented player coming back on the roster?
Well, obviously he's got experience. I mean, he was a part-time player, obviously, as a freshman who earned his way onto the field with his play. They kind of just let him play as a freshman because there were 2 other really good safeties that were on Notre Dame's team. And so he was kind of able to either sit back, play center field, do whatever. But then last year, he really took a major step up because even though he wasn't the veteran safety, because that obviously goes to Sean Crawford. He would be the definition of veteran since he was at Notre Dame for so long. You knew I had to get something in there, something. But he was still the guy at safety, and we saw him. What we saw was a great 1-2 punch with him and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and I realized he is not a safety. But one of the things that Clark Lee was able to do was he would have them on both sides of the defense, right? He would have them on opposite sides. So it's kind of a pick your poison situation. And a lot of times they went towards Kyle Hamilton, and Kyle Hamilton did a great job. I mean, he could fill the lane with ease. He can play center field with ease. I love him back there because he can cover ground so fast. I think was it the first Clemson game or was it the second Clemson game? It was early on. Clemson tried to go deep on Notre Dame, and the ground that Kyle Hamilton made up to go and break up that play was unbelievable. And they didn't go deep the rest of the game, basically.
That was the Alabama game.
Was that the Alabama game?
That was the Alabama game.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
They tried to run a route to the tight end up the sideline. I think it was their first drive of the game, and he almost picked it off.
Right, and he was playing center field. Yeah. Like, he was able to get to
He
the
was
sideline
definitely inside the hash. I mean, that was impressive.
Yes.
I think the thing that you're kind of bringing up, Vince, that's so important is there's a lot of safeties that are great cover players or center fielders or alley players or great tacklers. I think what makes Kyle Hamilton unique, Vince, is he can do all 3 of those things. He could play free safety and be the best free safety in the country. He could play an alley safety and be the best safety in the country. He can move to rover and be an all-American linebacker. And that's, to me, what makes him so special is that versatility, but also what I don't think we
really focus enough on is this is an incredibly intelligent football player too, Vince.
Absolutely. And that's what was initially what got him on the field. Yes, he had all the physical tools, but we've seen guys with physical tools not get on the field as early as Kyle Hamilton. One of the things that got him on the field, because it's one of the things that really makes a difference to Brian Kelly and his staff, is understanding the playbook, whether that's on the offensive side or the defensive side. It's wrapping your mind around it, knowing the X's and O's, knowing where you're supposed to line up, being able to help other guys line up. That's what Kyle Hamilton was able to bring to the table, even as a freshman. Now, they didn't put everything on his plate, obviously, but the fact that he is such a smart player, which is one of the main reasons why he played so much as a freshman. And at Notre Dame, we just don't see that very often. And he had that great combination of talent and football IQ, and that's what got him on the field. And that's what makes him such a great player, because he can do it on the field and he can do it upstairs between the ears. And when you're back at safety, you've got the whole defense in front of you. So it's really important that you understand how all the moving parts go together. It's kind of like the catcher on a baseball team. You're the only guy that can see everything. And you are kind of the guy that you're not necessarily getting everybody lined up, but you understand why when this guy moves, and when, this and this, why all those things kind of go together and work together kind of like a symphony. And when you understand that, that makes you an even better player, because you can anticipate where those holes are. And that's one of the things he just does so well.
Now, this is not a defense that's easy for safeties to learn, Marcus Freeman's. But I would argue, Vince, that it is there's less on the shoulders of a safety in this defense mentally than it was in Clark Lea's defense. It was much more of a safety-driven defense. I think that should then free up Kyle Hamilton to be used, not combine that plus he's now going to be a junior. I think that's going to be something that's going to free him up to be even more of a versatile weapon. And that's the thing I think Clark Lee did a really good job with. Yes, there was a lot of times, more often than not, where they weren't on the same side of the field, but he would then line them up in certain situations and blitz them from the same side. And it's another one, pick your poison. Hey, running back, which one of these two guys do you want to pick up?
Right.
And that's where it's going to be unique, see how they use him. I mean, in third down, do they use him more as a center fielder? Do they bring him in the box and use him like they use Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah? That's the thing. So how do you replace Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah? Well, depends. On first and second down, you replace him this way. On third down, you can replace him with Kyle Hamilton, But that's the unique aspect. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing from Kyle Hamilton this year. And is how do they use him? And how they're going to use him is going to be so dependent upon who else steps up. And that, to me, is that's the big storyline. We know who Kyle Hamilton is. If he just repeats his sophomore year, he's a second-team All-American, right? I mean, it's a really good season. And his numbers would have been even better. A, they played one fewer game than normal. And two, that ejection against North Carolina, he was on pace for a huge
He still game. Wasn't he still the third leading tackler, even though he got kicked out in the first half?
He had 6 tackles.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about we did on a pregame show that the pregame show you do that day. And they said, one of the questions we were asked was, who's going to lead the team in tackles? And I was like, it's going to be Kyle Hamilton. And of course I ended up being wrong, but he was on pace for like 20 tackles.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. It was absurd. Right. And the thing that was so impressive, it was the type of tackles he was making. He was just like tackling guys in space. And that was set to be just his best game. And just his range and his playmaking ability is really, really special. And I'm really curious to see how Marcus Freeman and Chris O'Leary and the staff is going to use him because he can play in coverage. He can play zone, and he, of course, can be a weapon against the run. And I'm especially interested to see how they use him on third down. But big part of that, Vince, is you can only use him in certain ways depending on how the other safeties play. If your second safety is not as good as, is not a championship caliber player, then you may be forced to have to use Kyle Hamilton more to protect that position, maybe more center field. So there's just a lot of question marks go into that. There were even more question marks at safety when Houston Griffith announced he was going to transfer.
Yes.
And look, Houston Griffith is a player that, let's be clear, has a lot to prove at Notre Dame, a lot to prove. We don't need to spend time worrying about why he didn't play more. The fact is he really in his first 3 years hasn't really played like the top 100 recruit that he was. Okay.
Now, forget the reasons why. There's can be a debate about that. The fact is the reason it was a big loss is because he was the only veteran safety that had the talent to become an impact player if he maxes out his potential. So getting him back was big, Vince. And to me, Houston Griffith emerging and being a breakout player for Notre Dame could be the biggest key to this defense, not only being as good as it's been in the last couple of years, but taking that next step.
Well, and I think that is really important, because if you don't follow this team like we do, and we're talking about the safeties and things of that nature, and you talk about who's going to be the most important safety on the field, and if anybody doesn't say Kyle Hamilton, you're like, whoa, what the heck are you talking about?
Right.
But I would argue, as you just did, that it's Houston Griffith.
So
he's the most important
from a
safety.
Playmaking standpoint, right? It's Kyle Hamilton.
Sure, right.
But that's
absolutely
not the point you're making. So explain why your pick would be, because like you said, most people are like, wait a minute, whoa, time out. The most important safety to have on the field is Kyle Hamilton.
Right, absolutely.
And we would both agree with that when we talk about you want to have your best player in the field. But as far as the whole unit being the best, explain to me why you say it's Houston Griffith.
Well, and here's the thing. We all know who Kyle Hamilton is and what he can do. And if he's not on the field, that's a bad thing. I mean, I'm not saying that he is the guy that I don't want to lose, because he's the guy I don't want to lose. I want to be clear on that. I'm trying to figure out a good analogy to use. If Houston Griffith plays up to his potential and to his ability, it's like he's literally a key to unlock what Kyle Hamilton can be. Okay. So what that means is, if you're not getting good safety play from your second safety, you need Kyle Hamilton to cover up those deficiencies. Okay. It's very similar to what was happening at the linebacker position last year. The Mike kind of had to cover up, what was happening at the other linebacker spot. Right. And so he wasn't able to be as productive as he may have been. And so very similarly at the safety position, if the second safety is not pulling his own weight, if he is not living up to the potential, and if he's not as good as he needs to be, well, now you need to use Kyle Hamilton to protect that other safety. So he's going to have to stay back more often. Now, staying back is not a bad thing for Kyle Hamilton, but you want to be able to move him around. That is where he is going to be most effective. Putting him at linebacker depth, having him fill the lane, having him blitz, having him do these different things. You can't have him that close to the line of scrimmage if you don't trust what your other safety is doing on the back end. So if he's not doing what he's supposed to do, well, you got to keep Kyle Hamilton in the back, because he's still your last line of defense. So Houston Griffith is literally that key to unlock what Kyle Hamilton can be. And he's really the only one on the roster right now that can fill that role, as we're sitting here right now. And getting him back, what Marcus Freeman was able to do, and we've talked about this a bunch. We
There's
did a whole
no interest in him coming back to Notre Dame on his part when he decided to leave.
Zero.
There's interest on Notre Dame's side to get him back, but not on his end.
But Marcus Freeman was able to, when he got the job, to reach out to the Griffith family and say, look, we need to have a conversation. He understood that we need to get this kid back in the fold. And that was his first recruiting coup of his career at Notre Dame. And it was huge. He's done some great things up to this point with recruiting and all that. Don't get me wrong. But that was his first one. Mm-hmm. And for the 2021 season, it was gigantic, because I know that Houston Griffith has not lived up to his potential up to this point, but he has talent. He had, and I think, and we've talked about this before as well. I think when, the one practice we got to see last year, which will be apparently one more than we're going to see this year, I was actually really impressed with what Houston Griffith was doing, because he was running around the field, playing with no pressure on him. He was the starter. He was communicating. Yeah, absolutely.
And Vince, we've seen that from him in the past in practice when they've actually let him play safety.
Right.
I mean, that's not a new thing.
And he's moved around, and that's another thing that obviously is an issue. But if he goes into this spring, he is the unquestioned starter next to Kyle Hamilton. I feel like with the fact that he's not going to be competing. Now, there's going to be guys that are going to be pushing him, and there should be. But the fact that he's not competing for that starting spot, I feel like he is going to play unencumbered, and his talent will be able to shine through. And I'm excited to watch what he is able to do, because I think he can live up to his potential.
Yeah,
I think he can be that number 2 guy.
You said that he's not competing.
Well, I think he's the star. I think he's the penciled in starter. I'm saying
he's going to have to compete. Look, Houston's not afraid of competition. You and I both know that.
Absolutely.
It's more about saying, like, he knows that they value him.
Correct.
And he's got to go out and play. He knows he has to earn that job, but it's more about they expect him to be that guy, and now he has to go out and earn it. And that's different than what it's been the last few years. And that's that part of it I definitely agree with. And to me, to add on to the things that you're saying, Vince, it's also because there's especially, look, teams tried to avoid Kyle Hamilton last year as best they could.
Sure.
It just was harder when you had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Well, you don't have him now. And so teams are going to do a better job of avoiding him. Well, when you're avoiding him, you're going after the number 2 safety. And that's a concern. I mean, and we saw that last year at times when teams would pick on Sean Crawford. BC picked on him and had some big plays. Clemson obviously did in the second game especially. So when teams are going to do things to try to get Kyle Hamilton away from the play, you need a second safety that can step up and make plays.
Pull his own weight. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you don't do that, then you'll be okay. You'll still beat Purdue. You'll still beat Navy. You'll still beat most of the teams in your schedule. But again, that's not the discussion anymore, right?
Absolutely.
This is Notre Dame.
Right.
Beating Georgia Tech, beating North Carolina, that should not be the gauge of, wow, what a great year. It's, can you beat Clemson? Can you beat Clemson when it matters most? Can you beat Alabama? Can you beat Ohio State? And in order to do that, you need great safety play. And that's where Notre Dame has to improve, is great safety play as a whole. Look, the 2018 team was, so far, in my opinion, Notre Dame's best defense when you consider the quality of the competition, just the all-around depth, all 3 layers. And guess what? They had great safety play. Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott were phenomenal that year.
Yes.
And they need to have a great safety play in 2021, not just a great safety. They already have that. They have a great safety.
Yes.
Now they need great safety play from the unit, and the better Houston Griffith plays, not only, to your point, can they then unleash Kyle Hamilton to move him around, because Houston can also play center field and play to the field and play to the boundary and those type of things. I expect when we talk about where they line up, they are a field boundary team. I expect Houston to be the boundary safety, and I expect Kyle Hamilton to be the field safety. And that's going to be big, because you're going to need Houston to play well to that side. And if he does, then that gives you more flexibility you can allow Kyle Hamilton to be in that playmaker role, because the field safety is going to be that playmaker. And so that's important to me, that he steps up and plays well, because the better he plays, the better Kyle Hamilton will play, because he'll have more opportunities to make more plays. And so that's why I view him as an ultimate key. Now, here's the question after that. If Houston Griffith steps up and is the player we think he needs to be, they're not done yet. They need more.
You do.
Because to your point, they ideally want to be a 3 safety defense. And even if you're not a 3 safety defense in your base, you want to at least be able to go to a 3rd safety against certain teams. You'd like to have that against USC and North Carolina to a degree as well. So they need at least one more person to step up. They could be okay if they can stay healthy. They're going to be okay with just 2 safeties. They'll be okay.
Right.
But an ideal world is that somebody else steps up, because there's guys like Cam Hart and Philip Riley and players like that. And one player to me, Vince, that it's a big spring for him is DJ Brown. Now, he got some playing time last year. Was solid.
He was okay.
But to me, I think Houston Griffith stepping up is also best for DJ Brown. Explain why that's the case, Vince, because you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, that way DJ Brown doesn't have to be the guy. He can be the spot guy. He can come in when you need a 3rd safety. He can come in to spell somebody. He can come in, in those special situations, and he can kind of have that niche role. And I think
you can protect the niche role. You can't protect a base down starter.
That's exactly right. And look, DJ Brown's a senior. He's been around for a while.
Smart player.
What you see is what you get, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's going to surprise anybody with his talent level.
Yeah, he's a very smart, intelligent, tough player that lacks the athleticism to play at an elite level.
And that's why I think that niche role could be perfect for him.
Yeah.
He can focus on that small window of what he needs to do. He can excel at it, and then he can go back off the field again.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's some guys, that's a perfect position for them. And I think for DJ Brown, I think that's a perfect spot for him in 2021.
That's why I think Sean Crawford's best season was the 2017 season, because that's exactly what he was. He was
Correct.
a niche player. Now, this is, again, post-injuries, right? That's what we're talking about. Like Sean Crawford, before the 2 knee injuries, was a pure corner. I mean, he'd been really, really good. But that was the thing with him is in 2017, he could be a niche guy. You could protect him more from the matchups that would give him problems. We saw last year they couldn't protect him when he was a 60-plus snap starter. And that's kind of what you look for. So same with DJ Brown. If DJ Brown's playing 20 to 25 snaps a game, you can find that niche for him, as you talked about, and say, hey, here's what he's really good at. He's very smart. He's very this, he's that. So let's find that role for him in these certain games and this certain look.
Right.
And we can protect him with Kyle and Houston. You can't do that as much if he's your 60-plus snap starter. So that's why I say Houston stepping up not just impacts Houston and the number 2 safety spot. It impacts Kyle Hamilton, and it impacts DJ Brown.
Now, I will say those 3 guys, I think it's kind of a we know what we're going to get from those 3 guys. And
we can get. Yes.
We know where we want them to go. We think they have the ability to get there.
And we've at least seen it. We've seen them do it. Right.
That's not a problem. One of the major question marks at this position now is who else is going to step up?
Yeah.
Because you need at least one more guy. You need at least one more guy to fill out that 2 deep, because you got 2 safeties. You need 2 backups. You need at least one more guy to step up. And there's kind of a group of guys. You got Litchfield Ashevon. You got KJ Wallace. You got incoming freshman Justin Walters, right? He'll be there this spring. Out of those 3 guys, Brian, what are we expecting from them? Is there somebody in that group that you think could potentially step up and be that 2 deep player in 2021? I realize Justin Walters is a freshman, so his future's way more ahead of him potentially, but Litchfield's a junior. KJ Wallace is a junior. I mean, they've been in the program for a little bit now.
Vince, it's not even just about being in the 2 deep. I'd like to see one of those guys step up and emerge and push DJ Brown, and even push Houston if he's not playing well. Sure. And that's the thing is I would love to see the 2 veterans. You need at least one of the 2 veterans to step up. And I think an intriguing guy in this conversation is KJ Wallace. I loved KJ Wallace coming out of high school because he wasn't the biggest guy or the fastest guy, but he's really athletic.
Sure.
He's very smart and he's tough. He moved to safety because of need. I mean, they recruited him to play corner.
Sure.
I'd like to see him get a shot to play some of that nickel safety. And he's a very similar body type to the guy that played that position for Cincinnati last year. He wasn't a real tall, big guy, and you can protect him because you'll have Kyle Hamilton behind him.
Sure.
That if Kyle Hamilton's playing the field safety, that player is to the field. And I like KJ, and I think KJ is a very talented player. He's another guy that I think got hurt last year because there was no spring, because they moved him to safety. Remember, he was going to play safety last spring, and of course they had to. He was actually going to kind of be a swing guy between both. In the spring. Well, now he's going to get another shot to play safety, and I think this spring is big for him because I think this is his chance to kind of step up and seize that role. Because look, if him and Litchfield Ashevon don't step up this spring, you've got Kerry G showing up in the fall, right? Yep. You've got Philip Riley at corner who will be here this spring. Say, hey, look, he's 6 foot, 195 pounds. If y'all don't step up and play, I know Philip wants a place to play. Right. If Cam Hart gets beat out by Philip Riley or Ryan Barnes or both, or if Cam steps up and balls out, but those 2 guys are also balling out, then you could say, hey, we like the 2 freshmen in the boundary corner spot. We're going to move Cam Hart over there to safety or something like that. So there's enough options at corner to where if those guys don't step up, they're going to have to figure something else out. And I think by the end of the spring, we will have a corner move to safety. It's somewhere. But they need to make sure that they have the kind of spring that prevents that from happening. And with KJ, he's got corner skills. That's what I like about him. He brings corner skills to the game. Litchfield's an interesting player because Litchfield is built a lot like KJ, but he's more of a alley safety. He's not a great cover guy. but he's smart and he's a quality athlete. We've just never seen him play. He's got like 20 career special team snaps under his belt, and we didn't get a chance to see him play last spring. He's another guy that sophomore class really took a big hit by not having spring last year, because for a lot of them, it was going to be their first spring at Notre Dame. So I'm curious to see how they both play. Look, Litchfield Ashevon was a borderline top 100 recruit according to Rivals.
Yeah.
ESPN ranked KJ Wallace in the top 250 of their rankings. So these are not guys that nobody thought could be a good player. These are guys that at least some people, including Notre Dame's coaching staff, thought were good football players.
Sure.
Do they step up or not? That's the question. And if they're the key to solidifying the depth. So like Houston is the key to saying we're going to have a great safety starting group. These guys are the keys to saying, hey, we're okay here. We're fine. We've got depth, we've got playmakers and all that kind of stuff. And more so at that boundary safety position, I don't think any of them are guys that you look at and say, boy, that guy's going to be able to replace Kyle Hamilton should something happen. But that's the big thing about this spring that's going to be interesting, Vince, because Kyle Hamilton had that ankle surgery. He's going to be limited this spring. And honestly, I think it's going to be good for Kyle Hamilton because, number one, you don't ever want a guy to be injured, but he is, and that's a fact. So the good thing for that is when he's not on the field, he needs to be standing right by Marcus Freeman and learning what are the calls, what are the coaching points, what are the things that he's seeing.
Yeah.
Right. So you talk about wanting to have a coach on the field. Well, this is a great chance for Kyle Hamilton to become a coach on the field because he is an incredibly intelligent young man. And if he has to get the mental reps, which we all as coaches value and talk about, that's the thing I'd always tell them. If you're injured, you better not be with more than 5 feet away from me the entire practice.
Right.
Right. Now, don't make me bump into you every time I turn around, but you better at least be like kind of in my face.
Yeah.
Because that tells me that you're locked in into really understanding what we're trying to do. Because if you can go out on the field and understand what I'm thinking, if you can get inside my head, then you're going to be good out there. And that's the opportunity for Kyle Hamilton, is to see the game from that standpoint. I think would do wonders for him because he is such an intelligent player that he'd be able to process how the D coordinator's thinking much better. And then when he does get on the field, look out. But it also opens up tremendous opportunities because there's now more reps available to those other players.
Yep.
There's more reps for DJ. There's more reps for Houston. There's more reps for Litchfield, KJ, and Justin Walters. And even though Justin Walters is listed at like 175 pounds, that's a hitter. I'm really looking forward to hearing – I was going to say seeing what he can do, but but I'm really looking forward to hearing what he does this spring because he kind of strikes me as the kind of guy that's going to surpass his recruiting ranking pretty quickly, or at least has a chance to, because he's an athletic kid, hard worker, strong, rangy. He could be a guy that I could see. Boy, we'd like to redshirt him, but this is not going to happen.
Can't do it.
He's at least going to be a great special teams player. The question is, is that 170 plus pounds kind of concerns me a little, but then you see pictures of him and you see a pretty cut up, strong kid.
Sure.
So if he's physically able to play as a freshman, he's another guy. Cause what Justin brings that you lack with KJ and with Litchfield is he brings some length. He's 6 foot plus 6'1", long arms. And what he brings that DJ doesn't bring is to me a much more rangier athletic player than what DJ Brown is. So he's a guy that I would like to see him mature quickly. Being an early enrollee is going to be huge for him. We may not see it this spring, but if he has a good spring, then maybe that puts him in position to do something in the fall. So I actually think that there's enough bodies here, Vince, to say if everybody steps up, they're going to be okay at safety. The question is who bats 1,000 in those regards?
Well,
that's the concern.
Let me ask you. Let me throw you a curveball here real quick because I was looking through the spring roster that was sent out the other day, yesterday, and they have Isaiah Pryor listed as a safety. I wanted to ask you about that.
They have him listed as a DB.
It said S. So that's why I was
I was looking at the roster and I thought it said DB.
Okay.
Look, they had him listed as a DB last year.
And he was at Rover the entire season.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they moved him to Rover pretty early in camp. So, I just don't see that. I don't see what he can do there. I don't see him as being a guy that, in my opinion, has the coverage ability to play that position. He is a pure alley player.
Right.
He is a guy that I look at and I say, he's listed as a DB.
Oh, okay.
On the roster, whereas the other guys are listed as S.
Yeah, the numerical one, I thought they had him listed as an S.
I didn't look at that one. Let me look at the numerical one. What number is he again? He's 10, right?
He's 10.
Yeah, they have him listed as safety, so they have him listed as both.
Two different places.
But that's what it was last year. That's so Notre Dame. They listed him as the DB on last year's roster too. I'm not worried too much about it.
I just wanted to throw it out there, throw that name because he was that big transfer that everybody was all excited about. Yeah.
And that's fine. Be excited about him, but be excited about him as a rover, not a safety.
Kid. Yeah, he's just not a cover guy.
He's got good downhill ability.
Yes.
Look, that's what crushed him at Ohio State. I mean, he started at Ohio State. He started 8 games in 2018 at Ohio State. But the Purdue game was one example when they got torched because Purdue was able to get him in isolations and coverage and get him in space, and he got abused. And that was kind of the end of his basically his end of his starting career at Ohio State. He just, to me, doesn't have the flip your hips cover ability that you want. And that's where I say, if you play him at safety, you're losing the ability, in my opinion, to make an impact with him. And I could see Notre Dame coaches falling in love with him because he's big, he's strong, he's a good kid. From everything I've heard, he's a good kid. He's a smart kid. He's a great worker. He has all those types of things you look for. He's got size, and he's the kind of guy that coaches tend to fall in love with, kind of like Shane Simon last year. Because if I can just get him to do this, then it's great. But he just doesn't have that. Right. So that's kind of where I'm with him. But and that's where we're at, Vince. So that's kind of wrapping up where we are with the safety position. And we'll see about where Isaiah Pryor ends up, but I feel he's going to be more of a rover because otherwise, who are you going to have at rover? And maybe they're working him as a safety to be that third safety, which is essentially the rover.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So
it's terminology.
Yeah. And look, we always do the 3 questions, and the 3 questions are exactly how we went down it. Number 1 is, how are they going to use Kyle Hamilton? I don't know how much of that we're going to really be able to learn in the spring because he's going to be limited.
Sure.
Does Houston Griffith finally step up and become that guy?
Has to.
That's going to be a big question. Yep. And then the third one is, do the depth players play because they have to, because they need somebody, or do they seize hold of that position and take those spots? Those are the 3 questions that we'll have. 2 of them especially important this spring. The one about Houston and the depth. And we should hopefully find answers. And if we don't get positive answers, then you can darn well bet that somebody or 2 at corner is going to end up moving back to safety. True. So that's going to do it for our position previews. Vince, you and I tomorrow are going to record a podcast that we'll put out on Saturday where we just take a big picture look at the spring, what we're looking for, breakout players, biggest questions, biggest areas where we're most excited, biggest certainties, all those different things. We'll talk about quarterback play and all of that on Saturday, which is the day that spring practice starts. But, of course, to later today, because this is coming out on Friday, at 1:00 p.m. Eastern on Friday, we will have our live mailbag. We're going to talk all things Notre Dame and Notre Dame recruiting. So have your questions ready. Be there with us. Be there. Join us, and let's have some fun. So make sure that you're with us. So for Vince D'Addario, I'm Brian Driscoll. Have a great rest of your day. See you at the live chat. And then after that, have yourself a great Friday and a great rest of your weekend.